Here's an interesting thing to ask yourself. How many times on average during a round of Tekken would you say that you perform a hit confirm? I think most people would probably answer something like not that often, or maybe not as often as I should, or maybe something like my character doesn't really have that many useful hit confirms. But I think, in fact, we hit confirm a lot more than we realize, maybe as much as several times in every single round that we win. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. But the reason I'm really thinking about this right now is I did a Tekken and Coffee recently, and this really interesting question came up from Reddit, right? I don't remember exactly how it was phrased, but the point of the question was, do advanced players in this game hit confirm small pokes? And do they then make a decision in the moment based on that hit confirm? Because if they do, that's obviously very difficult, it's constant, and it requires a lot of reaction speed, right? And it's a fantastic question. It's exactly the kind of question I think that you should ask yourself when you are trying to understand the system for the first time, and the kind of question you should have in mind when you're watching advanced players and trying to learn from them. So later in the afternoon, I had a drink and I was thinking about this, and I went on sort of a hit confirm rabbit hole journey, and I would like for you now to join me in the hole. But what do I mean when I say that we perform hit confirms all the time? Well, consider this situation right here. I perform a hop kick, it connects, and then I have to do the next hit of my combo, this down back two, and I have to do it before Paul hits the ground, otherwise I've missed the opportunity and I won't be able to combo. But I'm not going to throw this down back two every time. I'm not going to do it if the hop kick whiffs, and I'm not going to do it if the hop kick gets blocked. So it is a basic example of a hit confirm. And the sort of reverse is true as well. If the hop kick gets blocked, then realistically what happens next is Paul is going to block punish me, and that requires the Paul player to react to the fact that they blocked a hop kick, right? So you have a very basic situation, Miguel performing a hop kick. It's over in the blink of an eye, but you have two completely different outcomes that are both based in reactions from the two players, right? And the reason this reliably works so beautifully in this system, the reason it really works, really gets to the heart of frame data design in Tekken. And these aren't coincidences. You know, it's not coincidence, for example, that a snake edge is going to animate or impact after something like 27 frames or more, because when the moves are designed, the developers have figured out what is the limit of like average human reaction time for a game like this. And by the way, it tends to be somewhere around 20 frames roughly. It depends on a bunch of factors. It differs from moment to moment and from person to person, but just as a rough estimate, it's around 20 frames. And if you're going to have a launching high damage low in a game where lows are not blockable unless you predict them, then you have to place the impact speed of that low comfortably outside the spectrum of human unreactability. Otherwise, that low just becomes game-breakingly powerful, right? So one of the reasons Tekken is such a game of skill is that they are constantly playing around with the limits of human reaction speed, and that means that there are these opportunities. Not everybody can get it right every time, but there is the opportunity to do things that are very skillful and difficult in the game, right? So let's get back to hit confirms for a little bit. I think when most people think about a hit confirm, what they're actually thinking about, if they say I don't do them that often, is they're talking about hit confirmable strings. And I think Miguel is a great example of almost everything I want to talk about here. But as an example of a hit confirmable string that is very useful, he has 4-3-4. So this, as you can tell, is a high damage wall splatting tool. The second hit is the wall splat. So the first hit right here is -5, not that bad at all. The second hit is -15, so launch punishable. Huge difference. You don't want to get this string blocked because you can eat a full combo for the punish, right? But as long as you hit confirm this, you can delay it for just long enough that you're able to react to the hit and still have the string be natural and still get your wall splat. I never see people use this move online. Well, first of all, I never see Miguel online, but when I do, they don't use this move. They tend to go for something a little bit more direct and a little bit more impatient. So, say for example that you wall splat an opponent, you slam them down, and then you want to do some sort of mid for the Oki, maybe hunting for another wall splat. You see the steel pedal all the time. So the steel pedal, I mean, they're similar in the sense that they're both mid and they're both going to wall splat, and they're both minus 15 on block. The steel pedal is different in some ways. It's obviously better if the opponent stays on the ground, but if we're just thinking about them as mids that have the potential to wall splat here, they're both launch punishable, but if you hit confirm this string, you can completely nullify all of the risk by just hitting the break if you don't see the hit right there, or if you react to the block. It's really block confirming and not hit confirming, but if you do that, it becomes an almost zero risk move. Which means that it's potentially very, very good, right? And things like this actually show up all over the roster. And I remember, for example, when I started playing Tekken for the first time, which was right at the tail end of Tag 2, when that game was basically dead, I was trying to learn Leo. And people made a big deal in those days of learning Leo's hit confirmable down forward 1+2, 1+2 wall splat. Very similar move to this, right? It was like, even for intermediate or like new players, beginners who wanted to learn Leo, that's something that they worried about. It was considered a key to the character. But whenever I see somebody use that for Leo these days, it's obviously a legacy player who has been doing it since the previous game. People seem to worry a lot less about these hit confirms, and I see no Zafina players, for example, myself included, ever wall splat using back 4-4. But I think really the best example in the entire roster of a hit confirmable string and how important it can be is Negan's Intimidation 1+2. And if you go back and watch the guide I did for Negan a while ago, I explain how if you don't represent Intimidation 1+2, that stance doesn't work at all. It doesn't have any real mix-ups whatsoever. It falls apart completely. But Intimidation 1+2 also really sucks unless you hit confirm it. If you hit confirm it, it's amazing. If you don't, it's not very good at all. So the entire mix-up game of that character, in a sense, hinges on that hit confirm, right? But I play a lot of Negan, and I don't always hit confirm that move the way I'm supposed to, because you get away with it a lot of the time. You get, hesitation from the opponent. Maybe they don't have the knowledge, maybe they don't react in time. But if you are playing against somebody good and they know what's happening and they know the frame data, in other words, when you get to a higher level and you're playing against quite advanced players who are like, on the ball, these things become extremely important and extremely useful. So it is still something that I think we should worry about. But in Tekken 7, hit confirms and a lot of these technical like things are having a diminishing role, and I think it's because of the power and properties of the moves that we use these days. We have moves that are equally good on block and hit, so why would you worry about which one you get? Just keep on trucking. We also have a bunch of moves with extremely fast recovery speed. So for example, the current recovery speed of the electric, you can throw that and not really worry that much at all about being whiff punished for whiffing it. So you keep doing it at sort of random times until one connects, and then you do a giant combo. There's not that much like defensive thinking around it when it recovers that quickly. And another thing, a huge thing, especially with DLC characters, is like pushback, right? If a move has a bunch of pushback, then the frame data situation is nullified, and things like block punishment, things like taking your turn, knowing frame data, performing hit confirms, and so on, they become less and less important. And I think that's a bit sad, because I think they are sort of the beautiful things that really make this system so interesting and fun to play in, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this idea of hit confirming small pokes, and do advanced players really do it? Let's get to the question that this person actually asked. So you can tell, I mean, in this situation right here, the hop kick, the window is so wide that it's really easy to do this every time. But if you consider Miguel's down forward one, and whether or not you react to that every time you use it, first of all, on hit it's +5, on block it's -2. So it's a very different situation, right? It's a difference of 7 frames. But +5 is also pretty big for Miguel here. For example, Savage 1-1 becomes uninterruptible. Savage 4 is going to trade with jabs at +5, and it's a massive counter hit launcher that also has homing properties, so if the opponent moves, it's going to catch that as well. So +5 in Savage is really quite good, but -2 Most things you do here, if you attempt that Savage 4, by the way, the opponent is very easily going to be able to counter hit you, or maybe even just stick you with a standard launcher in that window. So it's very different. So do these amazing Miguel players who use a lot of down forward 1 into Savage mix up, hit confirm it every time. I think the reason is yes, or the answer is yes and no. It's one of those vague ones, unfortunately, but it's a mix of everything, and it depends on which move you're talking about. One thing to realize here is that when it says +5 here, it's important to remember that that's a measurement of the recovery animations of both characters when this move hits, and they are comparing the moment in time when each character can take the next action. And in this case, on hit, Miguel gets to that point 5 frames faster, but it's not a measurement of how long these animations actually are, and they're always different. Like I've said before, if these characters were animating in this situation for 15 minutes, but Miguel got back into control faster, 5 frames faster, it would still be +5. So it doesn't really have that much to do with the actual window of time that you are presented with. But there's another thing in this game known as situation confirm, right? It's sort of the less known, like a cousin of the hit confirm. So basically when you're doing a move, you're constantly watching the opponent, and if you've played the game for a long time, you also have an instinctive feel for what is going on, and so you can sort of decide that you feel or think that the move is going to be a hit, and then jump ahead to the decision you want to make based on that before you really see the hit, and that widens the gap and gives you more time, right? So in a sense, it's almost like you're you're confirming the situation, but think about confirming a whiff and then whiff punishing. You're seeing the opportunity and you know that your move is going to connect. You don't, do something and hope it's going to connect, right? But this window right here, it is really, really small. And again, the frame data situation only really matters when you act as soon as possible here, right? And there's this thing with hesitation and mental frames that really comes into it as well. The reason you get away with using intimidation stance for Negan and not always hit confirming is that the opponent is just going to stand there a lot of the time. They don't, know exactly what they're supposed to do. But you have to act right away to really capitalize on your frame advantage. And the reason that works in Tekken, by the way, is that the move allows you to buffer. Otherwise, you would have to do frame perfect inputs whenever you're trying to capitalize on advantage. And this is interesting. It's actually the reason Smash Brothers Melee is considered such a difficult game to master. Tekken is also an extremely difficult game to master, but for different reasons. But in that game, in Melee, as far as I know, I'm no expert, but as far as I know, there is no ability to buffer a move before you're back in control and have it come out on the first frame. If you want to do that in Melee, you essentially have to be frame perfect, and everything you do is like a 1-frame link, which is, humanly impossible, basically. So it's almost like a fighting game that can never be played optimally, but if you're very good, you can get close. And I think that's honestly one of the main reasons that game has been competitively interesting for as long as it has. It's still alive, and it's still, at least as exciting to watch as a newer, much more beautiful version of Smash Brothers. But for this to work, you have to react right away. So I don't think that advanced players in this game always do this, but they mix in actual hit confirms, situation confirms, hard reads. That's another thing. They have a feel for what they think the opponent's going to do, and they just make a decision based on that, and just gut feeling. And it becomes this sort of instinctual thing that just flows, but it is still something that really has to do with reaction time. And whenever you are able to be calm and really react to those hits and make decisions based on them, you are going to do better. Your counter hits are going to connect more often. Your lows are going to connect more often. You're going to do like actual uninterruptible mix-ups that the opponent has to eat. So don't sit around would be my advice in practice mode and constantly worry about, trying to hit confirm every tiny poke, but at least, try and make informed decisions. Maybe look back at your gameplay and realize that you are pressing buttons or keep keeping up your offense when you shouldn't, and then also find out if your character has some of these really potentially useful hit confirmable moves, and practice them, because if you weave them into your gameplay and you actually just take that moment to like breathe and like, I'm going to actually try as hard as I can to do this the right way now, because so much of it just flows, you just keep going and you want to do the big move, so you do the steel pedal. But if you try and weave these things in, it really makes a big difference. But it makes a big difference specifically when you are getting a bit better and your opponents get really, really good. And so, I think block punishment has a diminished role in this game. I think movement has a diminished role in this game. I think hit confirms, crouch cancels, instant while standing, all these like great things that I was like taking notes on when I was new. I feel like they are shrinking, and I hope when we get a newer version of this game that it's sort of a return to the true complexity of this system. Because even though we want fighting games to be increasingly casual and inviting to everybody, I think the community will stay excited, even if the system is really complex. And I think Smash Brothers Melee is a great example of that. So just a couple of thoughts on hit confirms. I'm sorry that question doesn't have a definitive answer, but it is really interesting. And I was kind of watching, Sephi Black play, specifically Miguel, and look like, do I think that he like knows that the down forward one hit every single time he does something after down forward one? Does he decide, whether or not he's going to do something from Savage or stay outside of Savage? And it's just a lot more complex than that, and it's going to vary every single time somebody does a move, and it's going to vary depending on the animation speed or recovery speed of that move on hit or block. So yeah, it's a big, complex, difficult system, and understanding Tekken is like grappling with an eel. When you think you have a grip on it and you think you figured it out, it turns out that there's usually a lot more to it. And because we're humans, because we can't play perfect all the time, it's always going to be difficult. There's always going to be complexity, as long as the game is designed around that sort of limit of human reaction speed. As long as we're placing stuff in that area, the game is going to remain challenging and really interesting. So thank you so much for watching this. It was rambly as usual, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys again very soon.